Hello, in this video I'll be focusing on the Great Pyramid, but I'll be recycling some animation that I used for a fairly recent video talking about Beauvais. So if you've seen the Beauvais Cathedral episode, you won't be seeing anything new here, but more for especially this important number 273. I'll put the link in the description to the upload directly previous to this one, and how Sun, Earth, Moon, and the stars especially are described by this particular set of digits, 273. But also, is the Great Pyramid, is it a textbook in stone? So many other ancient sites across the world incorporate this particular number. They have astronomical connections, musical connections, beautiful arithmetic, and of course geometry being a cornerstone of this quadrivium: geometry, arithmetic, music, and astronomy. But especially this very wonderful number 273, 27.3 especially, so 2.73, 27.3, 273, and we'll see how they unite multiple fields in just one of these lovely numbers that just seems to be built into nature. So we have all these ancient sites, these ancient systems of weights and measure, and the sun, earth, moon, and stars being united by this particular number 27.3, and so that's in degrees, that's in distance, and that's also a measurement of time. And there's, well, of course, just went through those connections. And well, now what else do we have? So we have, of course, the solar system, and this would also incorporate Bode's law. I've done some videos on that. It's very beautiful geometry based again on the vesica, and that describes the position of the planets from the sun, and again from this very simple but very beautiful geometry and arithmetic. And let's begin. Okay, weights and measures. Hermes, Thoth, Hermes also known as Mercury, as in the element, or as the planet Mercury. And so Mercury and Venus. Now Venus and Mercury, or Hermes and Aphrodite, had a daughter, Hermaphroditos. That's the origin of the word hermaphrodite, as in hermstones, and even the depictions of Hermaphroditus is a lady with block and tackle. So what's the distance from Mercury to Venus? 0.273 AU. 1 AU, or an astronomical unit, is the average distance from the Sun to the Earth, and that connects as well because from Venus to Earth, again, elliptical orbit. So if you tend to do those first page Wikipedia searches, you're not going to get it, but that's condensed information. We have to include elliptical orbit, so they do pass between these points. And it's interesting because in Bode's law, Earth would be described as 1, and 1 astronomical unit is the distance from the Sun to the Earth. So Bode's law blends beautifully with this as well. But then we have the asteroid belt, best known as by the planet series, as in the ancient guide series of agriculture, where we get the term cereal from. So that's the main planetoid in the asteroid belt, and that passes through 2.73 AU as well. But then we have, so Jupiter now, it's an elliptical, it's a spheroid. It's not a pure globe, but the circumference, their equatorial circumference, again, there's always, especially with a gas giant, there's always a bit of elasticity in there, but essentially it's coming to 273 miles in circumference. And that will bring us to Saturn, which is tilted at 27.3 degrees, and the rings of Saturn. Now, you could include, now there are these ever so faint rings that were sort of only relatively recently discovered, and only when the sun shone on them, so the rings do extend out further. There's a nice connection in there as well, but the classic rings of Saturn, as we know, are around about 273,600 kilometers wide. Now, this is miles, so circumference of Jupiter in miles, and there are 1.609 kilometers in 1 mile, and so essentially the diameter of the rings of Saturn are at a phi ratio to the circumference of Jupiter. Now, and of course, being 27.3 degree tilt there as well. And well, of course, it's always a lot more. It is really a huge amount more to this. Peter Plichka, a little book of coincidence, mentions some of these as well, so worth mentioning him. Okay, now since Jupiter is essentially 1/10 of the size of the Sun, the circumference of the Sun, again, it's a big ball of gas, all lumpy, and doesn't have this nice flat surface, or like not a flat surface, but a clear-cut surface between, well, the surface and the atmosphere. But again, so it is passing through 2,730,000 miles as well. Um, now, but now the Sun and the Earth, we've already seen connections between Sun, Earth, Moon in 27.3. Well, if we look at the density of the Sun, again, sort of on best available evidence, so so some will have it around about 27.6 average ratio, so that's within this 1.3 from the average, because there are different densities there, but that would pretty much bring it into a density of the Sun being 27.3% as dense as the Earth. And well, it goes on. So the surface gravity of the Sun, and this is important because often, yeah, there's a whole thing there, but from the again, it's 273 ratio between the Sun and the Earth again, and again that's within this 1.3 average, 1.3% average, which also just happens to describe the elemental composition of the Sun being 27.3% heavier than hydrogen within 1.3% as well, just out of pure coinkydinky. Now the internal temperature of the Sun, again, that's based on best current available. Now there's but still there's pretty good science for it, well, yeah, if you're in, but what we have is an approximate of 1,500,000 degrees C, which converts to 27.273 on the Fahrenheit scale. Again, within this very small, essentially it's the same margin there as well, which is another little telling part. Now it's also interesting to note that, so now we're talking temperature, now Celsius and Kelvin. Now there's a whole bunch of stuff in here as well, so at 40 degrees there is this sweet spot where they're all at minus 40, they all merge together, but that's something else. But so water boils at 0 degrees C. It used to be 30 on the Newtonian scale, it would be 33, but 32 there. And on the Newtonian scale, that's 200. So Celsius, water freezes at surface temperature at 0, and we have 273.15 K. As we're absolute 0, where everything freezes, that's 0 Kelvin, is negative 273.15 degrees Celsius. Now that's an interesting point because the surface temperature of the Sun and the Earth at a 1 to 273 ratio. Now the average global temperature, which includes the Antarctic regions, that is a little bit lower. I'm talking about the equatorial surface, because the bulk of the Earth, now the Antarctic regions pose an extreme, and again, surface temperature of the Earth is about as political as you can get. So even researching it is like a minefield. But so 20 degrees Celsius is 273. Well, again, within this very narrow band, the temperature of the Sun. Now, of course, what's the temperature in space? Space isn't an absolute vacuum. Otherwise, it would be 0 Kelvin. It's at 2.73 Kelvin. So temperature is a measure, same, just like length and just like time. Now, we also have the Sun and the Earth, back to there. So the volume, it's at a ratio of 1,273,000 to 1. So that's three-dimensional volume, and that's pretty much, well, that's a good description of the area in geometry and how this number will bring us there. So if the area of a circle is 1, then the square will be 1.273 if it's in a circle inside of a square. So 27.3% again, which again earlier videos I showed the ratio of volume between a sphere and a cube, describing the Royal Egyptian Cubit in meters, and how that's also a proportion built into the pyramid as well. Good old vesica, the basic fundamental, let's just call it sacred geometry, but really just say geometry, and that in itself has this 273 ratio as well, 2.73, 2.73, and we see these same, again, just to shift the decimal place. More geometry. Now, Avogadro's constant, which is, well, it's a constant, so just like phi and pi and Euler's and these other numbers which are, constants, literally since the beginning they've been a constant, and that's why they're so important. That's why they're built. All these constants are built into the Great Pyramid. But okay, Euler's constant, okay, a pound, so basically it's how many atoms or molecules are in 1 pound, and that would be 2.7315, 273.15, the thermometer. And where we see it in Avogadro's constant, which is how do you, now that's per pound, and for those into their measures, a pound's a pound all the world around, connects to the pendulum, and even the if you look into your pounds and pints, what are you going to get? Well, you're going to get vesica numbers, and again 3.73, 4.73, which is essentially it's the vesica and the same proportions that are coming out of there. What's more, we have Charles's law. So heated ideal gases expand at 1/273 per unit of temperature, and that's a cool thing, because how do you work out the speed of sound? Different temperatures, the density change, the different factors in the air, and that will actually change the speed of sound. And how do we work it out? 273. So we're seeing physics and chemistry and geometry and arithmetic and astronomy and these systems of weights and measures. Now, you could also incorporate this as music, because what's the music of the Earth? Well, that's sort of from the Schumann resonance, where lightning striking the Earth, the Earth's getting impacted and it rings like a bell. I saw David Icky Ike talking about this, and God, that guy just, yeah. Anyway, but he was talking about the moon and all this hollowness from hollow-headed stuff. But 27.3 hertz of Schumann resonance. Now, there's also a 27.3 day cycle of lightning at the equator, which is an interesting point, because if we consider, we'll go to the next one. Close that for the moment, and we have this atmospheric tide. So the pressure of within the atmosphere works on a 13.6 27.3 day cycle as well. Now these are all public, like the description will be one long set of links, but you can of course go and double check and fact check everything you hear. As Abraham Lincoln famously said, not everything you read on the internet is true. And okay, now in regards to fertility as well, so from conception to birth, not now usually the 40 week is measured from the last period to birth, but from conception to birth, that's 273 days, or 10 synodic months. And of course the menstrual cycle, most commonly referred to as a 28-day cycle, well, the mean average is 27.3 to 30.1 days. Now that would describe the synodic month and the sidereal month, but also the 28th day, that's every 27.3 days. So we're seeing human fertility cycles just happen to harmonize with this as well. And while we're on 27.3 days as well, the heliospheric current, 27.3 days as well. So why are ancient weights and measure systems just happen to, in a beautiful symphony of extraordinary coincidence, just happen to fall on 27.3? Well, I'll leave that up to you. But given the amount of knowledge Greeks and Romans had, and the evidence in the archaeoastronomy, such as in the Great Pyramid, a lot like, for instance, the shadow on the equinox is called an accident that the pyramid settled, and it just, again, this is like, seriously, this is what they say. I'm not making this up. That it settled, that the eight-sided pyramid occurred because the pyramid it cracked because it settled, and it just happened to crack at 90 degrees from each other in a straight line across all four sides. I kid you not, that's what one of the explanations is for it. To now, so weights and measure systems. Anyway, so we have 27.3, 273.33 built across ancient structures, these iconic and very important ones from the Indus to Old Kingdom Egypt in the Great Pyramid as well, but all the way up to the modern era. And also the Great Pyramid, now Doric, Ionic and Corinthian, it just happens to be, now one rod is half of a chain, or a perch is one half of a chain. Well, that's 27.33523 Doric rods is the height of the Great Pyramid. But if we, well, the angle of the Great Pyramid, just like the circle and the square, which we mentioned earlier, and is 4 over pi ratio, 1.273. That just happens using some lovely trig, and that just happens to match the angle of the pyramid again. So, and the ratio itself, so the height to the half base on the western side incorporates that same proportion, which would also describe the size of the Earth in regards to the Moon, amongst so many other things. Now the Doric rod, and now one rod or a perch is half of a chain, and the Gunter's chain of 66 feet from this very Hermetic period, which was a rebirth really of older systems. 66 feet is one chain, 66 feet equals 60 Indus or Sumerian feet or Saxon feet, 100 links per chain, and well, again, whether it's links or chain, 273.4, and well, 66 feet equals 792 inches, and that in itself is a huge thing. I've done a video, Hermetic rule of the chain, and it's Sun, Earth, Moon, and stars all over again, just like 273. All these numbers in the infinite sea numbers just happen to come back and describe Sun, Earth, Moon, and stars, geometry, arithmetic, music, and astronomy. All just a coincidence, of course. Now, every 2,737 years. Now, there's this other CGI picture, but this is what the actual planets would look like from the southeast of Giza. That's the ecliptic, so that's the constellations zodiac line. If you inverse it, as above, so below, we drop it down, and we see that they match Mercury, Venus, and Saturn. And it's basically mirroring Orion's belt as well, which is the shafts in the Great Pyramid. One of them points to Orion, the other to Sirius, and, well, Mercury, Venus, and Saturn. Mercury and Venus, 273. Gaussian blur. So in computing, Gaussian blur is a way to blur an image. Now that might not sound like much, but it's actually, it's a little bit more complex than what you might think, because if you blur an image, how do you get it blurred properly? It just turn into a grey soup, if you just sort of do it in a random way. Well, Gaussian blur is based on this it's sum of the value of the masks is 273. There's the code, 273. Now, the interesting thing about Gaussian blur is it's probably the best way to de-blur images, even images that were blurred not using this particular method. So de-blurring an image it's a bit like how they fractals, and how they got this magic property virtually, now in inverted commas magic, but again, 273 to blur an image, which is a lot more complicated, to blur an image without losing it and just making it a grey soup. But also to de-blur images, including ones that, so it's not just it's like imagine like an antidote. Now, this is like an antidote that works on other poisons, not just the original one as well, which is quite
interesting. So again, in this computing world now, the phi spiral, the Nautilus spiral Fibonacci sequence being again connection to phi, and so the one-dimensional, so the line to the line, so the length to the height of each rectangle will get closer and closer to a phi ratio as we go along. But in the second dimension, the area of each rectangle to the next one will be at phi squared, which is 1/2 of an Egyptian Royal Cubit over 10. But anyway, now what's that? Because the so Fibonacci numbers 13 times 21, so 273 again, and this would bring us to a phi plus 1 or phi squared ratio of area within the Fibonacci spiral. But also it's interesting in prime numbers because we have these things called spheric numbers, multiple of 3 alternate primes, and 273 is just happens to be the of the first 3 alternate primes. Now 2 is a prime. You could even maybe argue 1 is a prime, but like 1 and 2 is the only odd prime, so 2 stands out. So that's that it's 3, 7, 13 I think is interesting as well, and that it basically, again, these 3 numbers, again, we're coming back to 13, so 3 times 7 is 21. So again, it's matching this phi type properties from the Fibonacci numbers, which in itself is a nice link. That's 27.33333, and brings us back to the pendulum, because again, the socle. Now the granite on the roof of the king's chamber is 80. Now again, so it would be 10 times this, so that you could use that as well. Now I'm still a little bit iffy about the exact measurements now. Of multiple sources would give me 18.04 feet as well. So you could also, that's describing the roof, the stones on the roof of the king's or the upper chamber as well, so that could be included. But it's worth bringing back in this pendulum because the Royal Egyptian Cubit, which would be defined by a 1 meter pendulum, 0.5236, half of that is that would equal phi plus 1 over 10, or phi squared over 10, within 0.0004 of that there. But so the meter and the Royal Egyptian Cubit and the pendulum, so we draw the straight line across to create that isosceles triangle. Now that right angle, okay, that's 2.734. What do we get there? 2.734. 033, 033, same number popping up right there. Again, all coincidence, I'm sure though. But back to 2.7333. So the medieval royal foot, and 144 of those as in Beauvais Cathedral, 27.33333, and 109.333, which is 1.09333 feet, 1 medieval royal foot. So it's the same number, conversion rate, it's just a shifted decimal point. Anyway, the medieval royal foot, the pendulum it creates, it's slightly less. So medieval royal yard is a fraction less than 1 meter, and that, but even this cubit defined by this pendulum also describes the actual measurements of the Great Pyramid looking from the northeast corner, not using ideal measurements on the actual survey there. And we just see again another piece, another portion of the extraordinary symphony of coincidences that carries on. And so 109.333, 27.33. Now 27.3 times 2 would be 109 point. Anyway, but what I mean by that is this. So I often refer to it myself, and it is a nice thing. But so if you multiply the diameter of a sun by 108, you get very, very close. You actually do describe the distance of the sun to the Earth within the sort of middle part. And if you do this, if you multiply the size of the Earth by 108, you get the diameter of the sun. And again, that is true within. But 109.2, or this, you could even incorporate 109.33333. I've just sort of rounded it off there just to be make the graphic a bit simpler, but these numbers, 27.333, 109.333, Sun, Earth and Moon unity point, because the circumference of the Sun, based like on Cassini, on the best, again that would bring it right in this sort of sweet spot of 2,734,000. Again, within less than 1%, which is the same number. It's the same. Within this very narrow band. Think of it more like a wave and an exact value, a bit like the Fibonacci spiral. But again, I'll do more in the future because I've honed in on what I consider the precise value, but I'm restricted to working on the available data and whether it's the weights and measures of ancient temples, modern ones. You're sort of stuck to the best available information. But the size of the Sun is 400 times larger than the size of the Moon. But the Moon is 400 times closer to the Earth, and that's why in the eclipse it looks like the Sun and the Moon are exactly the same size. As best we know, it only happens on Earth. The size of the Moon compared to its distance to the Earth is very unusual. Again to it's a bit like Phobos. It sort of stands out as this very special, freaky sort of thing. But it's also 10,920 kilometer circumference, 109.2. But so 400 in size and 400 in distance is this number that describes the distance of the Sun and the ratio of distance from the Earth to the Moon, or the Earth to the Sun. So 400. Now the Moon is 27.3% the size of the Earth, so 400 times 0.273, or what is 27.3% of 400? It's 109.2. And if you multiply the diameter of the Earth times 109.2, you get the diameter of the Sun. If you multiply the diameter of the Sun by 109.2, you get the distance from the Sun to the Earth. These things bleed into one another. Why are they built into all these? Any temple that's got 27.3 into it has 109.2, and archaeoastronomy and all these other, again, this is a short piece. It just really carries on. Again, you can, please check all this information. Yeah, and this is in my mind one of the most important. Why these temples all incorporate 27.3 and 108. Now, for instance, the size of the Moon times 108 is the distance from the Earth to the Moon. So many of these other temples incorporate the numbers 2953, 29.53 days in a synodic month. That's one orbit of the Moon around the Earth in relation to the Sun, Earth and Moon, and that's where the 400 to 400 ratio comes into the eclipse. So we see the synodic month and the sidereal month of 27.3 days are just so beautifully, harmoniously, perfectly bloody linked, and that they're incorporated into all these ancient structures, all these modern structures, and basically anything even remotely connected to Theosophy, Rosicrucians, Freemasons, Druids, Oddfellows, incorporates these numbers into them. So one of the things always in my mind is this some sort of echo? Is it in our DNA? But that it's used specifically in these buildings by these specific architects connected to the specific organization that it reoccurs. It has to be part of a plan, something that's being passed on, something that's known to those who know about the quadrivium, and then for the rest of us schmucks who were raised in the servile class, so to say, and we're given the classical dumbed down education, and we're at the mercy of gatekeepers who aggressively promote a very certain view of history, a very certain view of science, maths, and that all these disciplines should be separated, as where the quadrivium brings them all together. And well, this is pointing at something that these weights and measure systems, and again, not just weights and measures of length, but measures of pressure, of temperature, geometry, arithmetic, astronomy, phi, the golden ratio, time, are all here. And what's more, okay, that's this is the entry point, and this is again, happy to bring you this information, because it all just comes together, and it goes to the like my hypotheses on the Great Pyramid itself, that each corner is different. Each corner has a specific meaning, whether it's measurement, geometry, proportion,